Hello, everybody, and welcome to our asynchronous session for this week. I'm going to go over several things for this week and provide you with some reminders and things like that. The theme of this week is an all methods review. So, I want to just cover that briefly. And I know we've talked about methods for quite a while now, so I think probably over a month. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I do want to just cover most of the basic information and make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of methods. So again, we'll do a quick all methods review. I'm going to talk about section 4, your implication section. I'll do a bit of final exam review and then a few last minute reminders for you as you are taking care of things this week and as you're preparing to take the final exam. All right, so let's do a quick methods review. So we're going to talk about quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. So remember that data and facts can come in different forms, and those different forms will vary. So you'll have numbers, statistics, you can have photographs, words, documents, all kinds of stuff. Data and facts can come in both of those forms, in many different kinds of forms. All three methods of research can be rigorous methods of investigation. Now, I emphasize this idea of can be because just because something is a quantitative method, just because you've done a survey, does not mean it is rigorous. In the same sense, just because you have done interviews or just because you've done some focus groups also does not mean that is rigorous. So the rigor is in the setup and the implementation of your study itself. So all three can be rigorous methods of investigation, but it takes a good sort of scientific view to make sure that that is the case. The method that you choose, so whether you choose quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, should be driven by the problem that you have and not the other way around. So you should never say, well, I really prefer to do quantitative, so that's what I'm going to do. Or I really prefer to do qualitative. That sounds fun to me, right? You should really let the problem drive you and drive your method of investigation. So let's take just a brief look at all three that we talked about this semester. So quantitative. In a quantitative method, data comes in the form of numbers. Analysis is done using statistical equations. We talked about many of these equations. We have variables, and variables are compared. They're correlated, predicted, and many other things. So this is not an exhaustive list, but we talked about some different statistical tests that you could do. So Pearson's correlation, product moment correlation. We talked about linear regression. We talked about simple descriptive statistics and measures of central tendency, all kinds of things. But basically, we're dealing with variables, and we can do all kinds of different things with them. Generalizability can be achieved with a quantitative method. Just because something is quantitative does not necessarily mean it's generalizable. Remember, we talked about how a method has to be rigorous, right? So you can't just say inherently because it's quantitative, it's rigorous, or inherently because it's qualitative, it's rigorous. In the same sense, inherently because something is quantitative does not mean that it's generalizable. It has to be set up in a certain way, but quantitative can result in data that is generalizable. And lastly, a good study follows a very specific design and plan. With qualitative research, data comes in the form of words, photos, documents. I want to emphasize here, I use the word data in both. So data qualitatively, data quantitatively. But qualitative data is different. It's still data. They're still facts. It's just different. Analysis is done using coding. So we talked about a priori versus emergent. A priori meaning you have your codes already and you have a theory that guides you in your coding versus emergent where you let the data guide you. There are many methods to qualitative inquiry as well. So we talked about document analysis, interviews, focus groups, just to name a few. In qualitative research, we cannot generalize, but we can get rich, thick data, right? We can go into a deep dive with individuals, with organizations, with cases, whatever our units of measure might be. And lastly, again, to reiterate, a good study follows a very specific design and plan. Now let's take a look at mixed methods. Basically, with a mixed method, we're combining both qualitative and quantitative method, but, and here's the important but, they must be used together purposefully. So we talked about several different designs. We could do triangulation, a complementary design, development design, an initiation, or an expansion. So they have to be put together purposefully. Just because you do a survey and it's completely independent and you don't really care about the focus groups that you did, but you also did those, that does not make it a mixed methods. You have to combine them purposefully. And lastly, I'll say it again, a good study follows a very specific design and plan. All right, so let's take a look real quick at Section 4. Now you have a really great document that, that will help you with Section 4, obviously, but just a couple of reminders for you. In this section, what you're doing is you're linking the literature you reviewed to some practical ideas for your organization. So I want you to talk very specifically about practice. I want you to link this back to your organization. Connect your thoughts specifically to both literature and your organization. So you're going to be not only making it practical, but you're going to be making it specific, okay? Lastly, make sure you have 5 implications. This is one area where students will sometimes fall a little bit short. If you clearly indicate to me that there are 5 implications, that's going to go a long way in making sure that you get full points on this section, okay? All right, so I want to give you just a few reminders about the final exam. The final exam is comprehensive. It covers all the materials that we have looked at this semester, so reaching all the way back to the very beginning of the semester. It is a 20-question final exam, multiple choice. Think back to the concepts that we've covered throughout the entire semester, so things like what a theory is, what a theory is designed to do, why we use academic journals. We talked about what makes academic journals special, what makes them different from just newspapers and magazines. So why we rely on those for good research. Think about how to correctly cite a journal in APA format. By now you should have a pretty good indication, if not a 100% indication of how to do APA. Think about the scientist practitioner model. What does that mean? How do you apply the scientist practitioner model to problems in organizations? In other words, what would be your steps in approaching a problem using the scientist practitioner model? What would be the first step, second step, those kinds of things? Think about what multivariate means. Multivariate deals with quantitative data, quantitative analysis, so we can have univariate, bivariate, multivariate kinds of analyses. And then lastly, think about the difference between conceptual and empirical. Review that information. There will be some questions about methods. There will be questions about all of these kinds of things as well. So this is not a comprehensive list, but it sort of gives you an indication of some of the things that will be asked on the final exam. As always, the final exam is open book, open note, and you can take as much time as you need to complete it. So I expect that most of you will do very well on the final exam. Okay, so just some last minute reminders for you. Complete your final exam before our one-on-one meeting. You don't have to have this done if we meet before you have this final done, but it's going to be exceptionally useful if you do have it done beforehand because then we can get a better indication of where your grade stands. Similarly, make sure to complete your self-assessment and claim the points in Blackboard. So make sure to do your self-assessment in live text. Come back to Blackboard, claim your points. That just puts us even closer to where your final grade would stand, and we can look at that in our one-on-one meeting. We will review your Section 4 materials at our one-on-one meeting, and remember to use the sign-up sheet available in week 13. So those are just some reminders for you. If you have any questions, I'm traveling this week, but I'm happy to answer questions. If you can shoot me an email, I'd be happy to get back with you. You should have the reviews back on your Section 3 and can be working towards your final hat submission and your Section 4. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Good luck on the final exam, and I will see you next week.